Beau is Afraid. Yeah, this film's been out for a while and I didn't watch it. And it showed up on Amazon Prime, so I decided I'll give it a chance because I like Ari Aster. If you've seen Ari Aster's films, he did a horror film that called Hereditary, which some consider to be one of the best modern horror films ever made, and I agree. I think it's a pretty well done film. The film Midsummer I also think is pretty well done, but for different reasons. It's not exactly a traditional horror movie, but it does go in some area of cult mentality that I actually think is done extremely well and has also an equally horrific ending. Beau is Afraid is very different. Number one, it is a 3-hour film. 3 hours you have to watch this thing. Most horror movies are 2 hours long at most. And there is a lot going on in Beau is Afraid. And Beau is Afraid is, of course, a very accurate representation of what this film is about. It is about a character named Beau, Wasserman? I can't really remember what his last name is. But essentially he's played by Joaquin Phoenix, who seems to be playing a lot of characters that have mental health issues these days. And Joaquin Phoenix's character is essentially a guy who has a very overbearing mother. At least that's what we can tell. Because Beau is Afraid is one of these films that actually kind of has 3 different parts in it, or maybe, I'm going to say 4 different parts in it. And I'll get into some spoilers here in a little bit. But in part 1, it focuses on Beau being alone. And Beau lives in this kind of a rough part of town. He lives in some crappy apartment complex, which is probably just over, I believe, an X-rated theater or something like that. Now, the way we see what is happening with Beau, I don't necessarily think is really happening. This is one of those films in which things are happening to a character, but you can tell that a lot of it is based on the character's point of view. And the point of view of the main character of Beau is he's a very paranoid individual. For example, he is actually supposed to be visiting his mother, and he's got a flight scheduled. But something happens where he oversleeps, and what happens is he forgets something for his door, and he leaves his keys and his suitcase outside his door, and they are both stolen. And so he can't really get, he can't leave his apartment door unlocked, so he can't go on his trip. And when he calls his mother, apparently she is really disappointed in him. And this is going to be a very important plot point. So during this time, he's doing something like taking his medication, but then he realizes he has to take it with water, but his water is off in his apartment, so he has to run across the street to get some water. And here's the thing, his neighborhood is full of criminals. There's a guy who's naked and stabbing people outside. There are people that are just drug dealers and prostitutes that are just hovering outside. And while he's in the store, he sees all these people outside of the street, empty the street and go in his apartment and have a party. And he's just kind of forced to just sort of watch it. And it's crazy. And, there's just so many things in this thing that are just would this really happen? For example, he's got no choice but to sleep outside the scaffolding of his apartment. When he does, there's a construction worker working there who's just drilling something, and there's sawdust dropping on him. And the construction worker doesn't say hey, you want to get up or something? You can't be here or something he doesn't say things that people would say in this situation. So when Beau goes back to his apartment, he tries to take a bath or something like that, and there's a guy, for some reason, braced up above the bathtub just there and drops on him, and Beau has to run out of his apartment naked, and then he gets hit by somebody, and then the film goes into this weird second part where he's being taken care of by this couple played by Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan, and they're treating him kind of like their lost son, because they lost their son apparently in Iraq or something like that. And And this couple has a daughter who's like into drugs and is just really offended by the fact that Beau is there and is using her room. And the parents just didn't seem to like put him on the couch or something like that. And then there's just like this other guy living in this place who's kind of living in a trailer outside, and he's just this vet and PTSD that's just always trying to, there's just so many terrifying things happening in this movie. And I actually heard that this movie was billed as a comedy. And all I could think of is like, how is any of this funny? There's so many just tragic things going on about this. And at no point in this am I laughing at Beau, because I just don't really feel like that there's anything really funny here. And that, and I feel like this guy is just so paranoid about this stuff that you can't help but feel sorry for him. And maybe that's the whole point of this thing, is that we're meant to sympathize with him, and that I guess that's what we're going through. Anyway, the strangest thing happens to Beau later, where just like when he's staying at this one place, remember that daughter I was telling you about? She starts to like, I don't know, she starts to drink paint and they start to blame it on Beau. This is where, I mean, I'm not kidding. This is where this film gets frickin' weird. And then Beau tries to flee and he ends up out in the forest where he meets this traveling group of players. And then they show a play to Beau, and in this play, Beau sees his own life in this thing. And then they kind of go into this weird sort of animation style that I did not expect from this film like this. And this play scene goes on, is kind of the part 3 in this film. And it goes on for long and long and long. And you see that Beau actually, in this play, Beau has like 3 kids or something like that, and a wife. And unfortunately, a storm takes them away, and then he's trying to find them. And yeah, this is where it just gets so strange. And then that one guy, the PTSD vet, shows up and starts hunting down Beau. And yeah, and then Beau flees. And here's the thing. I forgot to even mention this, but apparently when all that bad stuff was happening to Beau, when all those people were invading his apartment, his mother dies. And she dies because apparently a chandelier falls on her head. And he finds this out because he calls his mother, and some UPS guy answers the phone and basically says, yeah, I was just in this house. There's like dogs and stuff, and the smell was so bad. And apparently this woman's lost her head and stuff like that. So he goes home to the funeral and then meets somebody from his past. And then, you know what? I'm not even going to, I could easily get into spoiler territory here. And usually when I'm around the 9-minute mark, when I'm around the 8-minute mark, I usually get into spoiler territory here. I'm sure by the time, from what I've told you, you may or may not want to see this film because of all of the strange stuff going on it. Part 4 is even the weirdest part of this thing. But to even get weirder, there's even a part 5 that is sort of the conclusion of this film. Here's what I believe this film is trying to say. I actually believe that this film is trying to show that maybe that Beau's fears and this idea that he's never really... because here's the thing about Beau's mother. Beau's mother is actually very rich. She owns a huge corporation. So why is Beau living in this shoddy part of town when he could probably be getting some money from his mom? I don't know. It doesn't seem to be stated very well. Maybe he wants to be away from her, but he can't be. Maybe there's sort of a curse going on with Beau. But yeah, apparently I think that is what is going on in this thing. Much of what you're seeing in this thing isn't necessarily what is really happening in universe, but really how Beau is perceiving it. And maybe Beau's mother isn't, because, all right, I'll get into a spoiler on there. Turns out Beau's mother is actually still alive by the end of the thing. And that's crazy. And this whole film is absolute bonkers. And maybe we shouldn't try and take this film too seriously, but if you like something like this, and I was kind of getting into the story because I feel like it is kind of a horror story in a way. Anyway, go and see it maybe you'll like it.